$1 billion of Europe goes up in smoke in Putin's hands. Russia turns NATO's pride into scrap metal. Greetings to the audience watching the GS Sai Gon TV channel. A military and political earthquake is shaking up the entire world chessboard. Russia just launched a lightning strike, causing nearly $1 billion of Western military equipment to evaporate before their eyes. The Patriot air defense system, sponsored by Germany for Ukraine, NATO's hope, was blown to smithereens as soon as it arrived at the airport. Before Europe could recover, Qatar flexed its muscles with gas, threatening to strangle the entire EU's winter with just one letter. At the same time, Kaliningrad flared up after a shocking statement by a US general forced Russia to activate the dead hand nuclear destruction system. Subscribe to the GN Go channel so you don't miss out on exciting videos. Without a warning, without time to send a defensive signal, the attack, described as a lightning bolt from a clear sky, struck Ukraine's Starokostiantynivka air base, considered a key point for deploying the German-supplied Patriot PAK-3 system. According to sources from the Russian Ministry of Defense and independent military channels, the strike was meticulously prepared following a THREAD firepower model. It began with a series of low-flying Garan-2 kamikaze UAVs, penetrating defensive radar layers and striking directly at 3 German GP air defense systems. The entire base's protective grid was de-energized in just a few minutes. Immediately after, Iskander tactical missile forces opened fire. The targets were the cargo and technical areas, where 2 Patriot radars and 1 launcher were being disassembled for installation. The strike was determined to be extremely precise, almost hitting at the moment of minimum transfer, maximizing damage. Not stopping there, a bunker buster bomb reportedly collapsed the underground command center, where Ukrainian officers were managing the reception of this weapons shipment. Result: the entire Patriot system was destroyed before it could become operational. Nearly $1 billion of Western air defense equipment, including radars, launchers, and logistical facilities, was wiped out. A punch that was both painful and swift, causing not only material losses but also a heavy blow to NATO's faith in the shield. The impenetrable shield they once prided themselves on. According to military analysts, the Patriot hardware alone cost no less than $500 million. Including logistics, installation, operation costs, and accompanying missiles, the figure could exceed $650 million, equivalent to more than half of the annual defense budget of a small nation like Estonia or Latvia. More notably, the US once promised to compensate Germany for the losses with a replacement system, but reality shows this was just a paper commitment. The US Patriot production line is overloaded, and according to some German parliamentary sources, Berlin may have to wait at least 18 months for compensation. A blow that not only shook Ukraine but also made all of Europe question whether billions in aid are being burned too quickly and too easily on the battlefield. Europe is bitter, strategic aid turned into pocket-burning gifts. A Patriot PAK-3 system, the pride of Western air defense, costs at least $1 billion, not to mention each accompanying missile also costs hundreds of thousands to millions of USD. Yet, in Russia's lightning air strike, this system turned to dust before it could even be fully assembled. Not a single shot fired, not a single operation, and no alarms. But this loss is not just measured in material value, it's also a direct blow to NATO's prestige. It's a direct slap to the West's belief that they can back Ukraine with weapon power, once it's a German-branded steel shield. The US was wiped out in just a few hours. The question is, who still dares to believe in its effectiveness? Anger is spreading in Berlin. Many German parliamentarians are demanding an urgent parliamentary hearing to clarify why a national strategic asset was sacrificed so easily. Meanwhile, European media is boiling over with a sense of being exploited. As billions of euros in aid are being burned by Russia like trash, all that's returned are images of devastation from the front lines. More importantly, the incident exposes a bitter reality. The conflict in Ukraine is depleting Western aid at an alarming rate. How many air defense systems, tanks, UAVs, and artillery shells have been lost without making a strategic difference? And how much longer will Europe's reserves dwindle when there is no victory, no peace, and no clear response from Kiev? Against this backdrop, more and more people in Brussels and Berlin are beginning to whisper a question once considered taboo. Is this war worth continuing to pour unlimited money into? Ukraine shaken, death barrier revealed, gun barrels pointed at their own soldiers. While Western weapons were being burned on the battlefield, an internal secret from Ukraine was unexpectedly leaked, astonishing both social media and military circles. Barrier units, with the right to shoot Ukrainian soldiers if they retreat, not only exist but are increasingly operating openly and organized. Previously, when Russia spoke about the existence of this force, the West collectively dismissed it as fabricated propaganda. But now, military blogs, Ukrainian officers, and domestic media channels themselves have confirmed the truth. What was once labeled as information warfare is now acknowledged as an extreme measure to maintain discipline in an almost desperate situation. According to multiple sources from Kiev, the barrier is a special force jointly established by agencies such as the SBU National Security Service, NGU National Guard, and the Ukrainian military. They do not engage directly in combat but stand behind combat units with the sole task of monitoring, preventing desertion, and punishing on the spot anyone who retreats, lays down arms, or disobeys orders, a form of maintaining ranks at gunpoint. Something considered brutal even during the Soviet era or world wars. But in Ukraine today, it is happening in the heart of the front lines, where soldiers not only face Russian firepower but also live in fear of being dealt with by their own people if they don't fight to the end. When asked, many Ukrainian officers reluctantly admitted, "This is something no one wants to do, but without it, the entire brigade could collapse overnight. It's not just a disciplinary measure, but a clear sign of a crisis in morale, manpower, and trust." This reality shows that Ukraine's fighting spirit is severely fractured, and the images portrayed on Western television may only be a superficial layer, concealing a war machine struggling to keep itself from falling apart from within. K-77 enters the fray, an invisible hand tightens its grip on Ukraine's skies. As expensive air defense systems like Patriot were just wiped out in the blink of an eye, from above, another silent threat began to spread its net. Russia's new generation K-77 air-to-air missile, a weapon likened to an invisible hand sweeping away any aircraft daring to take off from Ukraine, is equipped on Su-57 stealth fighters and Su-35 combat aircraft. The K-77 is almost undetectable by conventional radar thanks to its special design and active radar seeker with extremely strong anti-jamming capabilities. According to revelations from Defense News, this missile has a range of up to 190 kilometers, capable of intercepting any airborne target from a distance before the enemy can detect it. What makes the K-77 so haunting is its ability to self-lock and pursue targets to the end, even in dense electronic warfare environments. Once launched, the K-77 doesn't need guidance from the mother aircraft. It's like a space assassin, knowing how to hunt its prey independently. Russia's official deployment of the K-77 in Ukraine is not just a move to upgrade firepower. It's a clear statement that Russia has shifted from defense to actively controlling the skies. And once the invisible death has reached out, all Ukrainian aviation activities, from transport and reconnaissance to fighter jets, are placed in absolute danger. For Kiev, this is not merely a new weapon, but a life or death turning point. Because without a corresponding counter system, every flight will be a game of life and death, where pilots may never return. Meanwhile, observers note that the widespread appearance of the K-77 could turn Ukraine's skies into a de facto no-fly zone, stifling all aerial counter-offensive efforts during a crucial phase of the war. Russia tightens its grip on the ground, locking down logistics and burning down the rear from east to south. After gaining air superiority, Russia continued to deliver decisive blows on the ground. This time, it wasn't on the front lines, but a suffocating blow from within. In less than 24 hours, a series of attacks using kamikaze UAVs, smart guided bombs, and Iskander missiles unleashed fire across strategic hubs, from Kharkiv in the northeast, Sumy bordering Russia, to coastal Odessa in the south, and Menevsky in central Ukraine. In Kharkiv, a city once considered the heart of the defense industry, more than 10 Iskander missiles, 9 Cav bombs, and over 30 Garand-2 UAVs leveled weapon assembly plants, UAV repair facilities, and artillery ammunition depots. Odessa, a crucial point in the sea logistics line, also did not escape the firepower. Fuel depots, transit points, and even coastal supply ports were hit, blocking the sea transport route from the west. In Sumy, a series of military depots near the border burned fiercely after artillery shelling, while Menevsky, which had just received the Patriot system, is now a desolate wasteland. These developments indicate that Russia's strategy has shifted, not just attacking the front lines but striking directly at the logistical arteries of the rear. By destroying supply lines and burning down logistics depots, Russia is forcing Ukraine to fight with weapon shortages and depleted ammunition right from the second line. This is no longer direct confrontation warfare, but deep attrition warfare, where Russia uses precision and firepower to make Ukraine bleed from within, hour by hour, minute by minute. Kaliningrad ablaze, one NATO statement, all of Russia enraged, the dead hand on standby. Just one statement from a US general was enough to make Russia go into war mode. NATO could control Kaliningrad in the blink of an eye, declared General Christopher Donahue, commander of US Army forces in Europe. It was like a fuse lit in a powder keg named Kaliningrad, a territory considered Russia's #1 strategic base in Europe. Moscow's response came not with empty threats but with concrete actions: urgent deployment of S-400 defense systems, Iskander M tactical ballistic missiles, and bombers carrying Kinzhal hypersonic missiles. Every move is aimed at one goal: turning Kaliningrad into an impregnable fortress, where any reckless move by NATO could be met with disaster. However, what made the West shudder even more was intelligence information that Russia's automated nuclear system, Perimeter, also known as the Dead Hand, had been placed on the highest alert status. This is a fully automated nuclear attack activation system. No human control needed. If a nuclear attack occurs on Russian territory and communication with command is cut off, Perimeter will automatically launch the entire strategic nuclear arsenal, wiping the enemy off the map. And as if that weren't enough, Russia also declared its readiness to deploy the hypersonic missile Avangard, a weapon described as the West's true nightmare. With a speed 10 times that of sound, Avangard can wipe out a NATO capital in less than 20 minutes, from launch to target turning to dust, there is no doubt. Kaliningrad has become a life-or-death flashpoint. A careless word from NATO made Russia break its safety lock, putting its hand on the trigger and looking directly at the West with an unmistakable message. Try if you dare. But once the trigger is pulled, there will be no turning back. Ukraine in full crisis, Trump turns his back in silence. Zelensky finds himself isolated. While Russian bombs and shells continue to pound every city, another political storm is brewing within Kiev, even more terrifying than the firepower on the battlefield. President Zelensky is gradually losing support from the West, especially from Washington. The clearest signal comes from the man once considered the backstage decider, President Donald Trump. No statement of support, no opposition. No clear message was given regarding Ukraine's narrowing of the powers of anti-corruption agencies. In a life-or-death political battle, Trump chose silence. And that very silence is causing extreme confusion in Kiev. Analysts are divided into three streams of opinion. Hypothesis 1: Trump wants to clear out the Democratic Party's influence in Ukraine, which was once a soft fortress that the US opposition built to attack him during his previous term. Notably, through investigations by Ukraine's Anti-Corruption Bureau. Hypothesis 2. Trump views Zelensky as the biggest obstacle on the path to reaching an agreement with Russia. A stubborn Zelensky, determined not to negotiate, would prolong the war, which Trump always believed only benefits arms magnates. Hypothesis 3: Mr. Trump is simply biding his time, observing the changing chessboard, remaining silent so he can declare victory regardless of which side the outcome favors. Whatever the reason, one thing is undeniable. Zelensky is losing his most important support in the US, and without Trump's backing. Ukraine is increasingly vulnerable to political calculations within Europe, where patience with Kiev is also waning after massive aid packages have yielded no clear results. In this situation, Kiev is not only surrounded by Russian artillery but also tightly constrained by a dangerous silence from those once called strategic allies. From million-dollar weapon destruction strikes to large-scale air campaigns, from the ghost of Kaliningrad to Qatar's gas threat. And Trump's silence. The world is facing a knot as tight as a violin string. Ukraine is cornered, with every exit blocked. And the West is beginning to feel the cost of a game they once thought they controlled. Ukrainian UAVs attack Russian weapons center. Success or failure? In the early morning of July 26, the Ukrainian military launched a drone UAV airstrike targeting the military complex located in Staropropov, home to the Saikno factory, one of Russia's leading electronic warfare equipment production centers. The massive explosion, accompanied by a thick column of black smoke rising high into the sky, immediately spread on social media, leading many to believe that Ukraine had just dealt a heavy blow to the heart of Russia's military industry. However, just a few hours later, Ukrainian media itself sadly admitted that it's difficult to neutralize military facilities like these with just UAVs. The reason lies not only in Russian air defense, but also because Russian weapons factories themselves are designed to be unsinkable. They are not like a single building. They are a dispersed, modular complex, capable of withstanding localized damage and continuing to operate. Ukrainian security officials explained that even if a UAV hits and causes damage, that doesn't mean paralyzing the entire system. A fire, an explosion, a destroyed section is never enough. Russian factories are not fortresses but multi-headed, impenetrable monsters. In modern warfare, destroying enemy military infrastructure with UAVs is becoming a common tactic. But with Russia, this is almost ineffective. Not because Ukrainian UAVs are weak, but because of the targets they aim for. It's not a single fortress, but a multi-headed monster designed to be indestructible. Take, for example, the T-90M tank production plant in Nizhny Tagil, located deep within Russian territory, more than 1,700 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. This is not merely an industrial facility. It is a masterpiece of old Soviet strategic thinking, where every concrete block, corridor, and even assembly line is built to withstand bombardment and continue operating even when hit. The factory's structure is likened to a giant body with many independent organs. Each workshop, from welding and assembly to engine installation and cannon calibration, is isolated like a technical island. If an area catches fire or is hit, the fire will not spread because there are already fire-resistant concrete walls, airflow cutting corridors, and separate escape systems. In particular, the three vital production lines, numbers 6, 10, and 11, specializing in assembling fire control systems and vehicle assembly, are buried deep in the central area, protected by multiple layers like steel hearts. Surrounding them are auxiliary buildings. Storage areas and transition corridors form an impenetrable shell if relying only on small UAVs or scattered strikes outside the central core, which consists of administrative buildings, logistics warehouses, and operational centers acting as a sacrificial buffer zone in case of an initial attack. These structures will absorb damage first, giving the factory's core time to react, isolate the incident, and continue production. Even more importantly, around the factory, there is a Outage air defense system hidden among the buildings, ready to destroy any invading UAV before it can reach the actual target. Therefore, to take down such a factory, you don't just need precise weapons, but also a multi-directional, simultaneous, large-scale attack campaign with absolute coordination. This is almost impossible for Ukraine at the moment, as they can only use small long-range attack UAVs. Russia's lightning counterattack, Ukraine loses ground inch by inch, hour by hour. While Ukraine was busy directing UAVs to attack the signal factory, Russia's leading electronic warfare production center. On the front lines, the enemy had already started a different game. Without waiting, the Russian army launched a large-scale counterattack, fully exploiting the weakness they had just identified. Ukraine's communication and command systems are in disarray due to a technical malfunction. In just 24 hours, the situation had clearly shifted. On July 27, the Russian Ministry of Defense announced it had taken control of two strategic villages, Malivka and Zelin, names that seem small but hold great tactical significance. Malivka is not just a village but a key gateway to advance deep into the western part of Dnipropetrovsk province, where fighting had been frozen for months. Now, with Malivka in hand, Russia is closer than ever to Ukraine's vital logistical lines in the center. As for Zelin, though small, it is a blockade on the eastern flank of Donetsk. Losing Zelin, Ukraine not only exposed its flank but also lost its second-tier defense belt in Donbas. It's no longer a crack, it's a fissure widening with each attack. Without stopping, Russia launched a siege operation on Pokrovsk, one of Ukraine's key defensive cities in the Donetsk region. And then, the night sky turned deadly, with over 15 airstrikes combined with 83 kamikaze UAVs raining down on the defensive lines like arrows. If Ukraine once prided itself on its UAV advantage, Russia has now turned UAVs into high-level tactical weapons. Not for reconnaissance, not for support, but as a tool of mass destruction. Swarms turned into a rain of fire, pouring down on every stronghold, every ammunition depot, every communication point. And just when Ukraine most needed command capability, the Starlink satellite network unexpectedly went down completely. A blow from the sky, but without missiles. Just one connection error silenced an entire wing of the Ukrainian army. Starlink down, Ukraine plunges into operational darkness. On the night of July 24, a catastrophic tactical incident unexpectedly occurred. The Starlink system, the backbone of the Ukrainian military's communications, completely ceased functioning for over 2 hours, starting at 10:20 p.m. The entire front line, from Donetsk to Kharkiv, simultaneously lost satellite internet connection. The immediate consequence: no UAV could transmit images back to the command center. Infantry units lost communication capabilities, and operational orders could not be relayed. The commander of Ukraine's UAV forces, Mr. Robert B., raised an urgent alarm on the Telegram social network. "We are blind, unable to control UAVs, unable to receive data, unable to fight. In a war where information is the weapon. Losing connection is like losing one's eyes." Ukraine currently possesses about 50,000 Starlink terminals used to control drones, transmit reconnaissance images, connect to the command network, and even guide missiles. When this system went down, the entire operational axis on the battlefield also froze. Ukrainian officers described the situation as a digital nightmare. All units had to halt attacks. Artillery shelling ceased, unable to observe targets from UAVs, even having to use world-wearer radio waves for makeshift communication. Just 2 hours of network outage were enough to strategically paralyze an entire nation. Elon Musk and the parliament themselves shift the war's axis. Immediately after the incident, Starlink Vice President, Mr. Michael Nicol, spoke to reassure. It was just a network operating software error, not due to cyber attack or electronic warfare, but few were convinced. The timing of the network outage was too perfect. Just hours after Russia attacked Kharkiv, only a day before Ukraine launched a major counter-offensive in Sumy, and coinciding with Russia's swarm UAV operation into Pokrovsk, could it simply be a coincidence? That question quickly converged on one name: Elon Musk, the owner of SpaceX and also the controller of the Starlink system. Recall that in 2022, during Ukraine's preparation for a counter-offensive in Crimea, Elon Musk ordered the disconnection of Starlink in that area, citing the reason of avoiding nuclear war escalation. This order caused the Ukrainian military to miss a strategic counter-offensive opportunity and was a turning point that left many areas still under Russian control today. This time, as Sumy became a hot front and Russia just launched a fierce UAV attack, the incident happened again. Doubts cannot be avoided. Is Elon Musk repeating the 2022 decision, and if so, it means a tech billionaire can hold the power of life and death over an entire war. Implicit order from SpaceX when an individual can turn the entire front line. One day after the Starlink incident, Reuters released a shocking report. 3 internal sources confirmed that Elon Musk directly ordered an engineer at SpaceX headquarters in California to disable connectivity in areas including Crimea, Kherson, and Donetsk, where Ukraine was conducting a counteroffensive. Hundreds of terminals had their coverage cut. The order was executed quickly, without going through any military agency or multilateral organization. Some SpaceX engineers were shocked by that directive because they understood that cutting Starlink on the front lines would cause Ukraine to lose its ability to respond on the battlefield. This is not unprecedented. In the past, Musk has made similar decisions, without consulting any defense counsel, based solely on his personal intuition. And the most painful question arises: who controls modern warfare? Is it military generals or a tech CEO? It's truly ironic when a nation in a life-or-death war is influenced by the mood and decisions of an individual who doesn't live in the trenches, but holds the entire satellite sky in their hands. A British MP warned, allowing Elon Musk to control Starlink is like letting one person own NATO's switch, a decision that could pivot the entire situation. When military infrastructure depends on private entities, a bitter lesson for Ukraine. After the Starlink incident, the Ukrainian command held an emergency meeting. The content was not disclosed, but Ukrainian media quoted several generals admitting that the Ukrainian military had become too dependent on commercial satellite networks. Starlink, though powerful, mobile, and inexpensive, is inherently a privately owned platform, with no common control mechanism, no strategic guarantees, and, as reality shows, can be disconnected at any time if the owner wishes. The strategic question is, if in the future, other militaries, from the US, NATO, Taiwan to India, all use Starlink or similar services, who will ensure that these services are not abused? The July 24th incident showed the world a fatal weakness. A digital blind spot, where an entire modern army can be blinded by a single line of code. UAVs cannot fly, artillery has no target data, command systems are paralyzed, the army is in panic. Modern warfare is no longer just about guns and bullets, it's a war of source codes, satellite signals, and data access. Ukraine is the most vivid example of an army reverted to pre-satellite times with just one click. China builds Tibet Dam, a geopolitical blow aimed at India. While the world watches the Russia-Ukraine conflict, concerned about a modern war dominated by satellites and technology. In the east, China unexpectedly began construction of the world's largest hydropower project on the upper reaches of the Yarlung-Tsangpo River, which originates in Tibet and flows into India as the Brahmaputra. Chinese Premier Li Qiang called this a century project with a massive total investment of up to $167 billion. The goal is to divert 60 billion cubic meters of water from the upstream through giant tunnels for power generation. It sounds like an energy project, but for strategists, this is a new geopolitical weapon for Beijing. Because hundreds of millions of people in India and Bangladesh depend on this water flow, not just for irrigation but for survival. No one knows what will happen if China blocks the water flow during the dry season or releases it massively during the flood season. Indian hydrologists have warned that if a dam breach or earthquake occurs, the downstream region could suffer a humanitarian catastrophe, equivalent to a water-based atomic bomb. More notably, the dam area is built on an active geological fault zone, precisely where an earthquake in May 2025 killed 126 people. Besides environmental factors, Chinese scientists have also spoken out against the project. Because it violates national ecological conservation laws. However, despite all concerns, China proceeded. And the world faces yet another challenge. Water, seemingly apolitical, has now become a geostrategic tool. Ladies and gentlemen, what happened in the final days of July 2025 clearly shows one thing. Modern warfare has entered a new era, where non-traditional factors determine the outcome. A Starlink outage blinded Ukraine tactically. An order from the SpaceX CEO can turn the entire front line. A hydropower project can become a flashpoint for international conflict. The question is no longer who is stronger in artillery, but who controls the flow of data, signals, and non-military strategic resources. Elon Musk, a man not in uniform, can paralyze an entire counteroffensive. An anonymous engineer at SpaceX headquarters could be the one who accidentally pressed the button that changed history in Donetsk. A river flowing from Tibet could become a giant water bomb hanging over the heads of over 300 million South Asians. And in that very era, countries like Ukraine, or any nation dependent on foreign technology, must ask themselves again. How can sovereignty lie not just in territory, but also in data and networks? War of words. Moscow accuses NATO of preparing to attack in 2030. While the battlefield is still engulfed in smoke and fire, behind the scenes, another war is unfolding, not with guns and bullets, but with words and political messages. The war of words between Russia and the West has escalated to a new dangerous level, and a shocking timeline has just been revealed. The year 2030. The time Moscow believes NATO is planning an all-out attack. Speaking in an interview with Russian media, former Ukrainian Prime Minister Mykola Azarov stirred international public opinion by claiming that the West is fabricating so-called threats from Russia as a pretext. In reality, they have already scheduled an attack on Russia in 2030. Azarov accused that the continuous exaggeration of the threat of Russian invasion is merely a cover for the West to accelerate rearmament, expand NATO eastward, and turn Ukraine into a military launchpad aimed directly at Russia's flank. He warned, "This is no longer a media game. They are moving from words to actions." Coinciding with Azarov's warning, the director of the German Federal Intelligence Service BND, Bruno Kahl, also made a contradictory statement. Berlin asserts that they have clear evidence that Moscow is trying to push NATO back to its Cold War borders, retreating to the scope of the 1990s. This indicates that both sides are viewing each other through opposing lenses and both believe the other is preparing for an all-out war. When both believe that the other will attack first, then the risk of war is no longer a question of whether it will happen, but when it will break out. A war of words, once it crosses the line, can fully pave the way for real war. And 2030, if the fuse is not defused in time, could very well be the flashpoint. While Europe is straining to deal with the risk of a Russian-NATO war in Kaliningrad. In the Middle East, another hot front is burning by the hour, threatening to pull the entire globe into an uncontrollable spiral of conflict. Following the fierce air campaign dubbed Lion's Roar, carried out by Israel in coordination with the US against Iranian military facilities, observers noted a series of extremely alarming covert movements from Tehran. According to multiple diplomatic sources, Iran is not only restoring destroyed missile facilities but also considering withdrawing from the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty (NPT), a move that would collapse the entire regional nuclear control mechanism. If Tehran truly carries out its threat, it would mean that inspectors from the International Atomic Energy Agency (IAEA) would no longer have access to Iran's nuclear facilities. Experts warn that when Iran stops playing by the rules, the Middle East will move closer than ever to a nuclear arms race. At the same time, Houthi forces in Yemen, a close ally of Iran, also announced they were entering a phase of full-scale attacks targeting all cargo ships linked to Israel. 2 Greek cargo ships were sunk within a week, resulting in at least 15 sailors killed, injured, and missing. Statements from this group indicate that the Red Sea is on the verge of becoming a new naval battlefield. More concerningly, the heating up of the Middle East not only creates a risk of regional war but also opens up strategic opportunities for Russia. Moscow could exploit NATO's distraction in the Middle East to intensify actions in Europe or Ukraine, without fear of immediate Western reaction. Ukraine exhausted, desertion widespread, barrier forces revealed. While Western media continuously portrays a resilient Ukraine, the reality on the Donbas battlefield paints a completely different picture: exhaustion, panic, and insubordination. According to multiple sources, including Ukrainian military officials and soldiers, desertion, refusal to fight, and post-traumatic stress disorder are increasing at an alarming rate. Tens of thousands of soldiers have abandoned their positions, despite all penalties, while the rest find themselves trapped between physical and mental attrition on a front line that has lasted nearly 3 years. A term once considered Russian propaganda is now acknowledged by Ukrainian veterans themselves, barrier forces. These are special units, often belonging to the SBU National Security Service or the National Guard. They have the right to open fire on any Ukrainian soldier who voluntarily retreats from the front line without orders. Initially, the existence of this force was vehemently denied by Kiev. But in the context of numerous positions collapsing simply because soldiers refused to fight, the government was forced to admit to implementing extreme measures to maintain discipline. Some leaked clips on social media show internal clashes, where the enemy comes not from the front but from behind. In a desperate effort to maintain logistics and morale, the Ukrainian army has put into operation several armored trains such as Yenis, Baikan, and Terex. These trains not only transport weapons and food but also serve as temporary shelters, the only place left with a semblance of safety amidst the dense bombardment of Donbas.